Tomorrow night, I'm very excited. I get to officiate the wedding of the couple that joined us last Shabbat for their Ufraf. And one of the things I say at the wedding ceremony when we're doing the bedekin and we veil the bride, and it's not that I've created this idea, it's a common thought, but one of the reasons why we veil, right, the obvious one is the connection back to the story in the patriarchs and matriarchs, but one of the more spiritual reasons we can talk about is that what we're there at the wedding to celebrate is something that we can't see. Right? The bride and groom always look so beautiful, the venues always look so beautiful, all the guests, all the food, all of that. But really what we're there at a wedding to celebrate is something that we can't see with our eyes, we can't touch with our hands, we don't use our senses to feel it. But it's the connection, the love between the bride and the groom. And there are different things like that. That teaching always reminded me of another teaching of Rabbi Harold Schulweis of blessed memory, who when he talked to children about God, young children, and tried to help them understand the idea of a God that you can't see, what that meant, he would ask them, touch your nose, right? They can find their nose. Touch your ear, right? Your head, point to this, point to that. And then he would ask them to, point to their parents' love. Right, some kids maybe go for their heart, and he'd explain, that's the heart, that's not love, right? What is that? Right? These are kids who understood that their parents loved them deeply, but they recognize that that's not something you can point to, you can touch. That's something you sense through other means, through the actions, through a feeling, through our emotions, through a connection, something not physical, but deeper than that. And so we're going to be a little interactive today. Are there other things that we know exist, but we can't necessarily recognize them with our senses? The sound of a tree falling in the woods. That's a good one. Right? I like that one. It's an old philosophical question. Does it make a sound? If no one's there, maybe not. Right? Depending on the technology we have, at one point there were things in the world that we couldn't sense and we didn't know existed, but maybe people had a hypothesis or a different idea that it might be there, and we got microscopes and telescopes and other fancy things. We were able to sense them more physically. One of the things that's been on my mind lately, I say lately in a loose sense because it's been 2 years now, but it's community. I used to think community was something that you could see very easily, right? If a synagogue was packed on a Saturday morning, right, that's a strong community. Or if there was a program that had a lot of people there, it's a strong community. When I would attend or officiate at a funeral service, and there were lots and lots of people that came out from the community, right, that was a sign I could see of a strong community. But for the last people have been separated and distanced from each other, it had me thinking about what it really means to be a community. Is it more than just those things? Is it more than just being physically together for events, for celebrations and sad times? Is there more to it? And I think the answer is that most certainly there is more to a community than just physical presence, than just things that we can see. And in our Parsha this week, there's a lot of interesting laws, but one of them, if a person is found killed in the wilderness, in the space between different cities, and whichever city is nearest, they have to perform this strange ritual, the Eglah Arufah. The elders of the city, they sacrifice a cow, they dip their hands in the blood of the cow, and they say, Lo shafchu et hadam hazeh. Lo shafchu et hadam hazeh. We did not shed this blood. And the question is, I know today we might expect our leaders of being capable of almost anything, but back then, I think they had a little bit more faith in their leaders. And people didn't actually think that the leaders of that town were the ones who had shed the blood of the person in the wilderness. So the question then is, why? Why do they do this act? I think it'll be interactive. If you have an idea, shout it out. What do you think? Why does this act exist? What does it symbolize? What is the meaning of the leader saying, we did not shed this blood, having to declare it? So it's because it's a commandment, we're not allowed to murder, and God said to do this ritual, so we have to do this ritual. But what is the meaning behind the ritual? Right, what does it symbolize for the leaders of the town, who I assume aren't actually suspected? Why do they have to declare that they didn't do it? Why do they have to do a ritual at all? Why don't they just look for the most likely suspect in the town? So for me, I had that question, and I looked for an answer because I didn't have one that jumped to mind, and Rashi has a good answer for us. And what he explains is it's a reminder. It's a reminder that everybody in the town has some guilt. It's not that anyone suspects that the leaders actually were the murderers, but if the leaders stand up and perform this ritual and make this statement and take some responsibility for what happened in their community, that it's a message to everybody else in the community that each of them need to take some responsibility. That when we live together, connected to each other, we're responsible for one another in all sorts of ways. There are a lot of laws that come from this, that the rabbis develop in the Talmud. One of those laws is that when a stranger comes to your town, and they leave your town, you have to help them go on their journey. You're not supposed to leave them alone. Now, you can't just be walking to the next town or the next village and the next community or getting in your car and going on the 401. It could take you hours before you get back and go on with your life. So what do? The rabbis were practical. 4 amot. 4 amot is the distance you have to go with the person outside of the town. It's roughly 2 meters today. They extend it not just to the town, but to your home when you have a guest over. You don't just send them out into the world and shake hands at the door and they leave the threshold and go out on their own. You're supposed to walk out with them outside of your house, past the door, 4 amot, 2 meters. It's a bit of an ironic number, given that for the last 2 years, that was the number we were told to stay away, right? 2 meters, 2 hockey sticks. But there's a symbolism behind this. It's a message to that person that they're not alone. That they're not an individual on their journey, they're not an individual leaving your home, that you're still with them. That you're still a community, that you're still connected to each other. It's a physical action that symbolizes something much deeper. Like the thing that Rabbi Schulweis would do to teach kids about seeing God and experiencing God, like the idea with the veil over our eyes. These are a reminder, a physical act to remind us that there's something more going on. Because the essence of this commandment is to make sure that every single person in your community knows that they're not alone in this world. That they are connected to you, to each other, that you're all connected together. And so my question is, how do you feel that sense of connection? I'm going to pause a little bit so you can think about it. But how do you feel a sense of connection to a community? I had a teacher in rabbinical school who's really good at waiting. Right? I was not good. The awkward pause, awkward silence, I want to start talking again. But Reb Mimi, she would sit and she would wait if it was a minute or 10 minutes. I'm not going to do 10 minutes, but... So you do things for other people, right? That's one way that you feel a part of a community, or you let others know that you're a part, or both. By doing things for other people, it makes you feel a connection as well as them feel a connection. So I love that. It's a two-way street when we act. Sometimes it's as much for us as the person we're doing the thing for. Eating together. Great, right? What's more Jewish to express community than to eat together and gather together? Anyone else have something? How do you feel that people care about you? or that you're connected to a community? Supporting a minyan, a service, wonderful. Sorry? Sports teams, what do you mean by that? Okay, right, the teams have a sense of community, and everyone that, I think fans, there's a big sense of community, right? I'm not a big sports person, but they wear the jersey, they have special rituals, special sayings, expressions. Right, they hug, there's a lot of physicality to that expression sometimes. Sorry? Shiva. Shiva's a great one, right? How we express our community and our connection to each other. Coming to shul, perfect, right? And we come together and we're physically in a space. But so what I want to express here is during COVID, it was at times very difficult to feel a sense of community. And one of the things that we're really going to be working on this year is renewing that sense of community, of connection. Our theme this year for the Chagim, high holidays, is renewal. Right, we're not trying to build something new, Beth Torah, a different Beth Torah. We want to go back to what Beth Torah has always been, a close-knit community. When I talk to some of the founding members and the families or the kids that grew up here, davening in a little building in a portable, or running around shul in this building, or whose kids attend the same Hebrew school, or before COVID did, that they went to when they were younger. We want to have that sense of connection, closeness. And while something that's in a big way up to your clergy, up to your professional staff, up to your lay leadership, the board, and other volunteers, there's a lesson in our parsha. The leaders are the ones who start the process, but it's up to each and every person in that town, each and every person in that community to make sure that that's what it is. And so as we approach this new year, I want us to think about what it is we can do, each and every one of us, to make sure that not just we feel a part of a community, but other members do. Right? There's easy things, like when you come on a Shabbat morning, and I see people doing it all the time, and you see somebody that's new, that's different, that you don't know, going over and saying hello. Or if you go into the room for Kiddush, and you see somebody sitting at a table by themselves, sitting down and talking to them. But there are other ways. If you look around the room, and you see somebody that used to be here, right, used to be a regular on a Shabbat morning and isn't here, you pick up a phone and you reach out to them and you ask them, is everything okay? Is there anything you need? It's not just during Shiva or the funeral when you see everybody there, but it's reaching out to somebody that's recently experienced a loss and saying, I know Rosh Hashanah is going to be hard this year. You have an empty seat at your table. Is there anything that you need? Is there anything we can do? Or just being there for someone to talk to. There are all sorts of little ways that we can create that sense of closeness and connection. I was at a synagogue where their tradition was for mourners Kaddish. If they saw anybody standing alone when they're mourning, whether it's for a yortzeit or they're actively in mourning or a yis or whatever it is, the custom was for someone to go over and stand next to them, right? The symbolism being, you're not alone. Is it another community in New York once? The rabbi, it was a Friday night service, he was leading a little meditation. And there were about 10, 15 little kids in the room, and they were making a lot of noise. And it amazed me. In a room of about 300 people on a Friday night, not one person turned to push these kids in the corner. And it was a message that families are welcome, that kids are welcome. There are all sorts of ways we can make Beth Torah feel like a close-knit, a tight community. That we can welcome new members, we can make old members who might be feeling a little bit disconnected after 2 years of not being in the building, a little bit more welcome. But again, it's not just up to us, your staff, your leadership. It's up to each and every person, not just those of you here in the room, but those of you joining us online. Each of us has a responsibility to help make this feel and continue to be and renew that sense of community that Beth Torah has always been known for. Shabbat Shalom.